Hello. Oh, and welcome back to Stat 3050 at the University of Wyoming online, having a great time. Now, we're doing something new. We're kind of moving into something new. We're going to be creating figures. Don't worry, you don't need an art degree to do this. The computer makes it pretty simple. And you can get pretty creative with these kind of things too, which I think is great. We're going to be using the ggplot2 library, which is a part of the tidyverse, which is great. So we don't need to download anything new because we've already got the tidyverse in there. And we're just going to be sort of taking it one thing at a time. There's a bunch of different figures and plots that we can use to kind of show what the data look like and to kind of make some ideas of how we should go about doing statistical analysis when we get to statistical analysis. I know it's seeming like it's taken a while to get into stats, at least the math side of things, but I promise we will get to it soon enough. Now, before we get really into it, since this is kind of a new section, I'm not totally sure how this is going to line up with the other videos as far as the playlist goes. I did want to give you some new music just to keep you entertained there. And here it is. Sturgill Simpson, Cutting Grass. If you're into bluegrass, I think this is kind of it. I really like this album. It's like one, it's pretty long. It's 20 songs. And they're all pretty good too. They all hit in a hooting and hollering kind of way. And look at him, Sturgill on what looks to be a Toro, maybe a John Deere. Definitely not a Stratton, right? It's definitely a Toro, I think. Of course, if you have another idea, just send me an email. Okay, now before we get talking about lawnmowers and bluegrass, let's talk about I guess two things. What makes figures good and bad, and then what I suppose we're going to talk a little bit about the structure of data too, or how data is shaped. We'll get into that first before we get into good and bad figures. I'm only going to talk about this briefly because it's not entirely important right now because we have our data in the way that we want it, at least the muscle density data that we'll be working with. But there are some instances where we need to kind of move data around to make it a little bit more easy to work with as far as creating plots go. Okay, so let me kind of zoom in here just so we can see some differences and some similarities. Oftentimes, oh no, often this is the way that we see data right here, where we have one column that represents one aspect of our data. We have another column that represents another aspect of our data, so on and so forth, right? And that's what's known as wide data, okay? Where each row represents a person or maybe like a plot of land or something like that, where each row is an observation, okay? This is the way that data is stored most of the time. However, that is not necessarily the best way of storing data for certain things, okay? Certain plots need to have it like this, the data like this. Now, these two data sets represent the same thing. They're just shaped a little bit differently. They're structured a little bit differently, where this is wide, where each row represents an observation. And sometimes we need to have it in long format, where each row represents the predictor. Okay, so in this sense, every column represents some aspect of the data. In this sense, every row represents an aspect of the data. Now, you're probably wondering, like, good Lord, when, why, what, who, when, what? Asking all these questions. Don't so much worry about it right now. We'll get into actually doing this in the future, at least for a few types of plots and a few types of statistical analysis when we get to that. So reshaping data, good to know. We've got two different types, two different forms of data, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Okay, so that leaves us to what makes a figure good and what makes a figure not good or bad. Okay, so the purpose of figures is to essentially show us what the data are doing, right? Whatever we're looking at, oftentimes it shows us relationships, differences, and the like, right? Now, there are no rules when it comes to making figures. And so when you see a bad figure out in nature, that was created legitimately. And there's no figure police. There's no statistics police out there, right? People get away with a lot, and it's sometimes it's kind of terrifying, and sometimes it's like, wow, I can't believe that got published or whatever, Um, figures show us what the data, how the data are behaving. These figures are what's supposed to be surprising, right? And then when we get into statistical analysis, that's what confirms what the figure showed us. Life is so much easier with pictures. Honestly, it is so much easier, and statistics becomes a lot easier too, when you can kind of see what the data look like and how they're behaving. So I've got all sorts of figures here. We're going to be making all sorts of figures in this class. So let's just get into what makes a good figure good. Okay. So we've got some two examples of good figures. Let's start here first. Okay. So this is what's known as a traditional box plot, box and whisker. You're probably familiar with it from intro stats, or if you're an econ, you've seen these probably all over the place. These are pretty common. Okay. And let's just talk about this. Let's just talk about this for a second. Let me just kind of zoom it in here. Oh, let me just bring it up to the front. Okay. So what makes this good? Okay. Well, we've got well-labeled axes. Okay. So we have our x-axis and our y-axis with capital labels. So dose and length, they're both capitalized. And then the dose shows us the units as well. I know this sounds kind of basic, but this is what makes life so much easier, right? We also see that each one of these things, each dose is also color-coded, which is not necessary, but it is very nice. It lets me know and lets the reader know that we're working with three different things here. And we see that here in the x-axis, and we also see it here with the colors too, right? And then we have length here. Now, actually, one thing I'm noticing is that length does not have a unit associated with it, and we should fix that. So maybe this is not as good as it could be, but it certainly is fine, at least right now. Okay, and then we come over here to the other one. And this one is a little bit more sort of intense or whatever, but we have the same idea, right? Where we've got a nice legend here that denotes sort of what the colors represent. We've got pretty clear axes here. Now you're probably wondering, like, where are the labels? These are actually coordinates. This is a coordinate system. So that is the label. And that's pretty much that. Now, these are pretty basic. These are pretty lackluster as far as, I think they grab your eye pretty well, but there's nothing, totally surprising about them. That is good. If nothing is blaring or not blaring, nothing is glaring as far as a mistake or anything like that, that means it's a solid figure. However, when we move into things like this, these are very bad. We'll take it one at a time. I'll let you pause the video just for a moment and see what you can find that's poorly constructed out of both of these. I'll give you just a moment. I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and I'll hear back from you in just a second. Okay, I'm hydrated. I'm ready to go. Let's talk about this one first, the one on the left. Gun deaths in Florida. Now, of course, statistics, oftentimes, I don't mean to laugh, but oftentimes statistics can be kind of depressing because, we use it to quantify many things, and oftentimes it's, things like death. Okay. Now, before getting too morbid, let's just look at it for what it is. Okay. Now, this is straight up a real figure. This is what the Department of Law Enforcement in Florida produced, legitimately too. This got published, and it's whatever. It's legitimately constructed. Okay, let's just kind of take a look and see what's wrong with it. Well, the first thing is, what's up with this red shading? It doesn't do anything. It does not do anything for us. It doesn't tell a story. It doesn't provide any more information. It just grabs your eye and that's it. Okay. And that's kind of, kind of inflammatory sometimes. Okay. Now, another thing here too is that the x-axis here, it's labeled as years, but I kind of wish they would have tick marks here because we can kind of see like, it seems like some of these data points are unequally spaced. So we don't know how much time exactly elapsed. Is it a few months? Is it a couple of years? Like what is it? We just have 1990s and 2000s and 2010s, whatever. Anyway, the most glaring thing about this is the axis is upside down. The y-axis, it it's upside down. So usually, let me see. Yeah, so like in this one, this good figure, this kind of origin point, this point where the two axes meet, usually represents, 0 or some really small values that, don't show up in the thing, don't show up in the plot. In this case, or area where they intersect is what I don't even know what year, and also 1,000. It's flipped upside down, okay? And this, okay, this is sometimes it's useful. In this case, it's straight up lying. Okay. Now, essentially what they want you to see, and I'm not making any political statements here, of course, but when this Florida enacted stand your ground law, it makes it look like it decreased here. If you're not paying attention to this y-axis here, then it looks like gun deaths decreased when this was first enacted. But since this axis is upside down, what we actually need to do is do that. And now we're reading it kind of backwards, but we see that it goes down, 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 down. And when that law is enacted, it actually goes up. But the plot, the way that it was, is not gonna really show that, right? Because it's trying to kind of fool you, which is horrible. It's awful. Also, like these weird, I don't know why they say 873 and 721 here on the ends. It's not totally necessary. So anyway, that's a real plot, right? That is a real plot. So I think the way that this is, what the story is trying to be told here is that, when this law was enacted, gun deaths went down, when in reality they went up. Okay. Again, not making any political things, any statements like that, but I am saying that this is this plot is fibbing. It's fibbing big time. Okay. So we'll move on from that because I can't look at that for too long. And let's move on to this next one. This one's a little bit more, I think it's a little bit easier to digest. What we see here, at least initially, is that interest rates over these 4 years or these 5 years go up. Okay. But do they? Let's look at the y-axis. What the heck units is that? 3.140 is the smallest unit, and 3.154 is the largest. The difference between 2008 and 2009 is 0.002. Oh my gosh, why would you do that? Why would you do that? That's such a small amount. Now, this is being totally naive. Maybe, if you're working with really large numbers, that interest rate might be kind of big. If we're working with like maybe trillions of dollars, then that's a lot, that difference between 2008 and 2009. However, it's likely we're not. We are probably not working with money that large. Okay. So this plot here, the breaks that are given here, or at least the distance between this unit and this unit, or this tick and this tick, is so small that it makes it seem like interest rates are going up, when in reality, they ain't. Or at least they are, but it's so small. So small. Okay. Also, these could probably be replaced with something more like this, with dots and a line instead of bars. Anyway, let's move on to some more bad stuff. Okay, let's start here. We will never, ever, 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 ever make a pie chart in this class for a few reasons. One, I think they're stupid. Two, let's just look. What is going on here? First off, with this number of things in here, I don't even know if my computer is showing like the difference in colors. Honestly, like I can't, and that might be me being colorblind. I don't know if I am, but I don't think so. But calcium and aluminum and I guess oxygen, they all kind of look about the same color, at least here. Also, it's not labeled. These things are not labeled anywhere on here. And now, if there are lines going from each one, maybe. But then the next thing is, I don't know what percentage this makes up, right? And especially when we start getting it down into this area here, we can't really differentiate, the size difference. What's the point? This is stupid. This is dumb. This makes me angry. So we're never ever going to be doing anything like this. The nice thing about R and the tidyverse and ggplot2 is that it by default uses colorblind friendly colors, which is great. So this to someone who is like actually colorblind would look like a big jumbled mess and very difficult to differentiate the colors therein. Okay. This series of plots. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. As far as all of them go, I think this one is the best, the top left one. Everything is labeled, fairly decently. This is just an example, so value doesn't really mean too much to us. But the only thing I would change in here is that the background bars, the lines, the kind of faint gray lines, they're going through the figure. I would make these a little bit more opaque so you couldn't see that background. Otherwise, this is fine. But let's move on to this one, okay? Now, this is the truth, and all of these other ones are constructed based on the same data. We're just kind of screwing around with what we can change. So this one has got, first off, some horribly bright neon colors. These are going to give me a migraine if I look at them for too long. And they also just don't really give us, having them as different colors doesn't really help us all too much. Kind of similar to this one, except this one is made in ggplot, and so these are colorblind friendly. I would imagine that these are difficult to see if you are colorblind. Okay, so anyway, aside from the colors, let's look at some other stuff. The font differences. Okay, we have, I don't know, Cambria, Times New Roman down here, Cambria here, and Comic Sans as the axis label. Why? Oh, it's so stupid, right? If you're going to make a figure, make everything consistent. The fonts should be consistent, unless, I mean, even if you're labeling something on the inside here, you should at least make it within the same family, okay? Oh, geez. Okay, we're moving on. Let's move down to plot C down here. Let me actually zoom in so we can see this horridness a little bit closer. Okay, so same data, but what's the difference here? Well, the y-axis is different for each bar, what's the point? This one makes it seem like 4 and 5 from A and B are the same magnitude, when in reality they're not, right? It needs to look more like this. I don't even know how you could do this in ggplot or in R, so we're not going to worry about it so much. But do keep your eye out for that kind of stuff. This is fairly misleading. Everything should be on the same axis, right? Everything, if you're making a bar chart like this, everything shares the same y-axis if you're measuring the same thing, right? Which in this case we are. And then plot D, of course, is completely absent of everything we need. We don't know what we're measuring. We have nothing as reference. We only have A, B, and C. We don't know. It is kind of going back to like this thing. We don't know how big the differences are between A, B, and C. They could be really, really tiny, like they are here. We know that it is like this. This is the truth, but we just cannot really get that picture going. We can't get that story told the way that this is. Okay. Oh man, some bad plots, right? Now, the nice thing about ggplot is that it's pretty difficult to do this kind of stuff, but but you still can do this kind of stuff, except for this. I'm not too sure about this one. But you can make plots like this in ggplot. You can make plots like this, but don't. This is just a fair warning for when you're out in the real world, looking at stuff, reading papers and articles and whatever else, and you see this kind of stuff. Just a healthy dose of criticism and cynicism is good. You don't want to be too skeptic about anything. Skepticism, not cynicism. Skepticism. A good healthy dose of skepticism is I think good. You don't want to question every single thing you see, but at least give it a little logical look before you believe it to be true. When something looks like this, when it really should look like this, and can we do it? And like this, yeah, there we go. That's what it should look like. Okay. Okay, so with that, I'll leave it there, and we will start making real figures here in just a second.